Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 2, Episode 3.
Welcome back, friends, for our most brotherly episode to date. Today we're sitting in my sister's apartment out in Mountain View, California, with a guest from the entertainment industry. From working for Stan Lee to writing stories on the beaches of Hawaii, welcome my brother-in-law, Tom Gray.
Hey, buddy.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
How was SF today?
San Francisco was good. I had a lot of work, actually. It was a very long day. I'm doing a thing for Crunchyroll, which is an anime distributor and now content creator.
Yeah, it's basically like the Netflix of anime.
It is the Netflix of anime, yeah.
Yeah. So if you watch anime, you already know. If you want to watch anime, go watch it on there for sure. People don't give a shit who you are yet, besides being my brother. So give me a rundown. What did you do in the past before Crunchyroll? What was like your trajectory without going into a bunch of detail?
Well, let me ask you. I'm going to quiz you.
Okay.
What do I do, Chris?
What do you do? Okay.
Because I have a feeling this is your least prepared interview ever, so I'm curious what you think I do.
I've been doing interviews this is like the 7th one in like a week. So yeah, I didn't prepare for this. We're sitting down.
There's a good excuse. Yeah.
Okay, whatever. So
I am your brother-in-law. I married your sister, so
I tell people that my brother-in-law is one of the most interesting people I know because he gets hired to do really cool random. That's what I tell people. You're a producer, a writer, location person. You make things happen when people have ideas. So like you did a job for McDonald's a while ago you told me about, right? Where you made, like you contracted out and had a shield that looked like French fries made for their whatever. Their thing.
There was a shield that looked like French fries, yeah.
Yeah, and then when we were in Vegas, you were just finishing up that project where you rented out like the Bat Cave and a tank for Jared Leto's album release party.
Yeah, we didn't actually end up going with the Bat Cave because the Bat Cave could not have the actual tank. They wanted a full-size tank. So the Bat Cave, and by the Bat Cave, anybody that is aware of Batman, they don't actually have a Bat Cave in Dark Knight because they blew up the mansion in the first movie. So in Dark Knight, he has like this like really cool location that has like, it's underground and it has all these LED panels on the wall, on the ceiling. So that was where we were going to film, and ultimately we didn't film in the Batcave. We went to a studio in Hollywood. Actually, it was East LA. They drove a tank into it, like a full-size actual military tank that we were really worried was going to tear up the street.
Which is why you weren't there for the party. You were in Vegas with me.
I'd much rather be in Vegas anyway, but I was not there for the party because I don't like to admit this. I really thought that the police were going to break it up because there were other issues that I won't get into, dubious sort of things happening. And I was like, I don't want to be here for this. So I made up a real good excuse that I couldn't be there. So if the person that hired me hears this, well, too bad.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. So, I mean, come on, my sister married you, and those are the types of stories that I hear. So what you actually do, like entertainment stuff, man, I don't know exactly what you do, but I know you did work for Stan Lee initially, or that's the first thing that I know that you did for work. And from there, then you had a YouTube channel that did really well, and you were like the director, producer of that. Mm-hmm. And through those types of things, you made connections to do all kinds of different projects. But can you give me like the quick rundown of basically what you did?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, you know at least enough to get through this, which is nice. So you're not just completely bullshitting me. I'll do a real quick sort of rundown of, because I do a lot of random kind of stuff. Basically what happened, I was managing one of Hollywood's top concert venues. It's called the Henry Fonda Theater for a while. And then I was getting really depressed because I went to film school and I wanted to make stuff. And I hadn't made anything, and I was just starting to get really annoyed. And a buddy of mine was like, hey, I have this opportunity to work with Stan Lee. And probably everybody's aware, but if anyone's not aware, Stan Lee is basically one of the top Marvel creators. He ran Marvel Studios for a long time. He created Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, all those things. He's the guy that has all the cameos in the Marvel movies. So a buddy of mine was like, hey, YouTube is like spending all this money to have these YouTube funded channels from these large content creators. So Stan Lee was one of them. And do you want to come run it? I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? So I did that for a couple years, and I got to work with Stan Lee all the time. Like, I think now the channel we created has, almost 1 million subscribers and has something like 350 million views through it. I was there from the beginning through the first couple of years of that. My favorite videos, I did a Stan Lee parkour video where Stan doing parkour. Obviously, we subbed him out with an actual parkour person, but then we cut Stan Lee actually walking around. It's pretty funny. I did superhero speed dating. And then from there, I created a show that I really loved called Cosplay Piano. And that went so well that ultimately me and the pianist for that, and what Cosplay Piano was, I found this amazing piano player, just this classically trained pianist who was just absurdly good. And I, decided to make these videos with her doing film, TV, video game scores. And we would do cosplay as well. So she'd be dressed as Catwoman doing it and doing, that kind of stuff and doing these crazy, ridiculous arrangements. And I love that thing so much that when ultimately I took a step back from the Stan Lee videos, and me and Sonia, her name is Sonia Belasova, we decided to create our own YouTube channel together doing those kind of music videos. And we did Player Piano. And that's the time I met your sister, was when we were starting that. We were doing a crowdfund campaign, which is the worst thing in the world to do. It's a lot of fun, but also a lot of stress. But, that worked out. We took a huge risk. I borrowed a whole bunch of money from a lot of friends of mine, $40,000. And we just made a bunch of videos and we started releasing them. And the crowdfund was to raise money to basically pay for those videos that we made and then some. And luckily it paid off and I didn't end up owing my friends all this money. So we did that for a couple of years. And then from there, I started getting hired. My company that I built from Player Piano started getting hired to do lots of different jobs. Our biggest clients were Blizzard Entertainment. If anyone goes online and watches the Azeroth Armory series, we produce those. And that's a blacksmith. Basically, if you're aware of the Man-at-Arms series, which is another one, it is a blacksmith who creates weapons based off of film, TV, video game stuff. His name's Tony Swatton. And so we did a thing for Blizzard, which is that, but for Blizzard-specific weapons. Worked with Crunchyroll a lot. We, did just a ton of stuff. And then ultimately, I gave it all up.
Yeah, you saw it. So my sister was actually in one of those videos, which was rad. I remember her telling me about how, oh yeah, my boyfriend does this and I'm going to be on YouTube. And I'm like, that sick.
Yeah,
wow.
She was in the Ghost Waltz video.
Yeah, you could catch her if you look
Which is funny, yeah. So if anyone would watch a video called Ghost Waltz, basically there's a scene where Sonia is a pianist and she gets up and starts dancing with these ghosts that are around. And your sister Kate, my wife now, she's my girlfriend at the time, is pretending to play the piano while that's happening. So if you actually look at her, she has no idea what she's doing, but it's fine. It's movie making and you can't tell these things.
It's kind of funny because most of the people I talk to are either really young and they're at the very beginning stages of they're just getting out of college, or they're thinking if they want to go to college and they're kind of at that beginning of that part, or it's kind of on the flip side of they've been doing whatever for a while and they've moved up. But you're the first person I've talked to that basically was an older version of what I was doing, on a more extravagant level of I was doing something that was okay, but I didn't love it, you know what I mean? And I was making enough money to do anything that I wanted to do, but then decided to say, F it, I want to take this risk. I stepped away from something to be able to start pursuing something else that I really wanted to without knowing if financially it was really going to work out for me. And obviously I'm glad I'm doing that, but you're right in the middle of it,
Yeah.
You walked away from that company not long after my sister finally got hired on fully for Google, right?
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of stability within the marriage financially.
I definitely did get lucky in that sense. So I think I blabbed a little bit. So let me clarify a little bit. So I ran this production company, Player Studios, that started from Player Piano, and we were growing exponentially every year. There'd be times where we had 50 employees and I'd be like, wow, this is starting to get there. And ultimately what happened is I kind of sat there and I was like, this is going very well. It's growing every year. If I do this, if I continue doing this, this is my life. This is what it's going to be. And it's going to be successful and it's great. But this is what I do. I'm going to make commercial content for clients. And it's mostly just either in support of something else someone created or like paying homage to something else someone created. Like if anyone watches Player Piano, they'll see it's all videos based off of other people's content, right? If you watch Azeroth Armory, it's videos based off of Blizzard content. Everything was based off of someone else's thing. And I was like, I originally came out to California to tell stories, to make my own stuff. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And if I continue down this path, I'm never going to really do that. I'm going to be very successful, but it's also stressful. Running a company is very stressful. And I was like, if I'm going to run a company, I'd rather run a company making stuff I want to make. Yeah, it's a huge risk. I stepped aside and basically gave the business to my business partner. And he's like, hey, do you want like a percentage of it? And I was like, here's the deal. Like I do, but at the same time, if I take a percentage of it, I'm going to constantly be pulled into things for it. Like I'll never get any work done. So I basically stepped away. And the whole last year, I just decided to write. You know, I took the entire year off. I worked a couple random jobs here and there, but like nothing really. But I wrote 3 screenplays for feature films, 3 books, 2 television pilots, 4 episodes of one of those television pilots. I wrote episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3 television specs for like Magnum Pi, Hawaii Five-0, and Star Trek. So, and those are just things I wrote for not fun, but like fun. I wrote them not to make money, but just to see if I could do it. So I wrote all that in a year.
Yeah, but the fun part for me is to watch you squirm a little bit of going from putting your time and energy into work that you are getting paid for, like it's contracted, you're getting paid, this is how that works, to all of a sudden my sister's like, yeah, you want to FaceTime? My husband's out in Hawaii again. I'm like, oh, why? And she's like, well, he needs inspiration, so he's drinking Mai Tais on the beach and writing. Yeah. And you're getting through all this writing, but again, that's the cool thing of like pursuing the passion. I get to watch you like looking at your mortality, right? Of being like, well, shit, I'm almost 40 and like my dreams are slipping away and I want to do this while I still have all this time and energy to do it. You're creating all this, but you haven't gotten paid for all that writing.
No.
And you might not get paid for all that writing.
And not only have I not gotten paid, I've spent like last year, so I just did all my accounting for the year. And what's funny is like, okay, we're going from the previous year where at the height of like some of our projects, we had 53 people working for us. You know, I don't need to get into the numbers, but like that was serious budgets, like serious money. And there was income being generated going through the company to making negative $18,000 last year, which basically just wiped out my savings.
Thankfully, you're super, super nice and you're willing to like sit there and be supportive of people. But my sister went from making very little money to being super financially comfortable and the whole roles just switched.
Oh, yeah. The roles switched entirely. So like it actually worked out really well. Kate, your sister, when she was in grad school, she didn't have a lot of money and I was making pretty decent money. So at that point, it was like a reverse sort of thing. And so like we talked about it, you know, this whole thing comes with her blessing. So like thankfully your sister is a boss. So, you know, we talked about it and was like, look, I'm not going to make money for a year. Maybe I won't make money for 2 years. And ultimately, you know, it's a bet, right? It's an investment. It's like it potentially could pay off a lot. And if it doesn't, I'll go back to doing something. And, you know, at least I gave it a shot for a little bit and, you know, sort of see how it went.
We got to hit our first song break. And obviously you need to keep your motivation going. You were telling me you're trying to get back to Hawaii 2 more times in the spring. You need to keep the writing going until something does hit. Hopefully some of these other things that are getting reviewed by people end up being huge feature films and then I live off your money forever. That's my plan. Yeah. But we need
it's a solid plan, bro.
But no, I mean, the podcast is similar in a very different way. This is like more my side project. Although I am spending a lot of time and energy on it, I am spending money to do this project that I haven't exactly made a lot of money on. I've spent a lot more money than I've made. So hopefully all of this hard work ends up paying off and financially at some point. I know you look up to me all the time. Like, I'm a little bit taller than you. I opened my own shop before you ended up quitting what you were doing to start writing. You came into my store and you're like, my wife's younger brother is such a badass. I just want to like do things that I'm passionate about too. But for real, who are some of your heroes and inspirations that you look up to?
My wife? No, I mean, yes, but heroes and inspirations. Oh, geez.
Well, you love the show Lost.
I do love the show Lost. I'm a very huge fan of the show Lost. I got married in Hawaii and on some of the locations of Lost. So, yeah, I like that show. I have a huge respect for some of the filmmakers that I grew up watching. So obviously people like George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, those are very obvious people to idolize. But certainly as a kid, those are part of the reasons that I got into what I'm doing was, people like that. And their projects that were very inspiring. I'm inspired by certain actions of people. So for example, I'm coming from a filmmaking background. I'm inspired by people like, when I hear stories like Quentin Tarantino or the Wachowskis, who made The Matrix, and other people, I hear their stories and they talk about how they wrote a screenplay, it got sold, somebody made it, and they completely just ignored them as a writer, which happens in Hollywood a lot. And they realized from that experience that they just had to make something. And then they went and made The Matrix, and they went and made Reservoir Dogs and, all these things. And now they're, huge filmmakers. I'm inspired by stories like that. I'm inspired by stories of people who may or may not have the success they want, but at a certain point in their career, but then they realize I have to take it upon myself to do what I need to do to get to the next level, which is, kind of where I am with the whole writing and, ultimately I want to make a movie. I have to do what I have to do to make this happen. If I don't, clearly it's never going to happen if I don't personally make the effort to make it happen. And I find that inspiring.
Well, you are exactly like Quentin Tarantino, for sure. That's when I look at you, that's what I think of. No,
thank you. Maybe.
That's one of the reasons I really love doing this podcasting, and what I really love about this show in particular, the reason I'm so driven to do it, is because I draw inspiration from all the people that I'm talking to. Everybody's in all these different industries and I can relate to them, but I walk away from all the interviews so inspired because of whatever situation that we ended up talking about. With the episode I just did with Andrew Cannon, where, he was told basically skateboarding was probably not going to make it happen as a pro, and he should probably go back to college. So he went back to college, and then, he was going to be a teacher, but he did end up going pro in skateboarding, and all those skills ended up working out and whatever. But listening to that was damn, you were responsible and take care of the education side, but still were what, fuck it. I still love skateboarding. I'm going to try this no matter what. I love pulling away from those types of things, which makes me think again that you obviously look up to me. You saw my store and you're like, that dude, he had kids and he was like, you know what? I want to leave a legacy. He wants to be proud of what he's doing. And that must have been your motivation, right? That's why you quit your thing, because you knew you didn't want to look back and be like, God, Chris was a badass and I sucked.
I certainly didn't want to become 80 years old and look back and be like, I never really, really made a hardcore attempt to make this whole writing and filmmaking thing happen. Like I said, I could have continued the path I was continuing. I could probably go back, even though I don't want to. But I could have continued that path and made a lot more money than I've made now. I left a lot of money on the table and a lot of connections the past couple of years of building this company. Basically let it go down the drain for the most part. But I think ultimately it will be worth it, because even if I do in a couple of years, I'm like, this isn't quite working out. Even if I do go back to it, I made a run at it. I don't think that's going to happen because I'm a pretty darn good writer. But if it did, I'd be okay with the fact that at least I made an attempt at it. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of people is there's so many people that don't even really fully try in something that they want to do that they might have passion about. You get a lot of people that think that they're trying, but they're not really putting their all into it. And yes, I'm privileged to be in a situation where my wife is doing very good at the moment. I did well in the years past, so I can take this big risk. I recognize that. Because it's important to recognize that when you're in a fairly privileged situation where you can take advantage of that.
True, but you aren't living off my sister's money either. You saved up money so that way you had this type of opportunity to happen. So give yourself credit on that aspect.
Yeah, that's true. I will pat myself on the back for saving money up that I then blew in Hawaii on a beach with Mai Tais.
I think the biggest problem is people are too afraid, and it really sucks. People who are successful, and if you are doing really well, hang on to the idea. Just remember, realistically, you can go back to what you were doing. You're so afraid of walking away. If you were good at it, that company wants you back. Yeah. There's no way they don't want to hire you back on the same wage that you were making before because they know what they're getting. Yeah. They're not taking a risk anymore.
Well, actually, that's what I was doing today. I'm being hired by my former business partner, which is kind of a funny situation and feeling, being hired from the company that you founded, basically. But I'm being hired just for a short-term job. I take a couple jobs here and there. I just don't do it full time. But yeah, no, I mean, if you're good at something, you can always go back to it. You can find some opportunity to do it. You might need to spend a little bit of time rebuilding it, but you can figure out a way to go back. But I think the main thing is if you want to do something and you're really passionate about it, you can do it full time. You can do it part time, but if you're doing it part time, that's fine. But you have to put your all into it during the time that you can allow yourself to do it. You know what I mean? Like you can't just half anything.
It's harder. It is much harder to make a living doing something you're passionate about than it is to just go work for Target or for somebody else. It doesn't mean that it's less satisfying. It's way more satisfying. It's way more fulfilling. You will be rewarded, and there's so many benefits. I would be the first person to tell everybody you should work for yourself. But it is harder and more work, especially up front. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to quit your job and think that whatever your passion is, you can pursue that 20 hours a week and have it work, doesn't work that way.
No.
You need to do it at least the same amount of hours that you're doing at your other job, but realistically, probably more, and is not going to make a lot of money, if anything, for quite a while. That's just kind of how it works. But you have to be willing to trudge through that and push through it.
You have to be willing to, and if you financially can do it, great. If you can't, you have to responsibly find a way to do it so that you can do it and financially still be able to pay all your bills. You have to take care of your living situation first. Like I would never advise anybody to give it your all and completely make the worst financial decisions of your life. Like certainly there's a lot of risk that is involved in doing your own thing, and you have to be willing to take those risks, but obviously don't be silly about it. There's people who, like J.K. Rowling, for example, when she was writing Harry Potter, she was a single mother and, writing when she had time. But she, well, the time that she allotted to write, used that time effectively. But it wasn't all of her time, obviously, because she didn't have money and she was a single mother, and that's what she did. You just have to give it your all. And I think we actually skipped over, I probably sound like a jerk where I'm like, oh, I'm in Hawaii drinking Mai Tais on the beach. So let me clarify what that is, because I think this actually goes into sort of my idea of how, for me personally, I have to give my all. I worked in YouTube space for a long time. I worked for a lot of different YouTube companies. All my content has like 500 million views throughout of the stuff that I've produced or directed. And I spent a lot of time when I was doing that reading YouTube comments and having to do the actual marketing and all that kind of stuff. Anybody that's done that will tell you it is a cesspool. YouTube comments are like a cesspool of things. It's just you get dragged down real fast. So what I ended up doing with the writing in order to get into the space of it, and I think that that can apply to a lot of things, not just writing, but I would take these trips to Hawaii, and I know that sounds really expensive and whatever, but no, I'd find the cheapest, crappiest Airbnb that I could find, and I would rent it, and we're talking $60 a night, and I would just rent it for however long I could afford. I would go to Hawaii because it was my happy space. I got engaged there and married there, and it's a completely separated place. And I would go with zero internet access. We would put parental controls on my phone, so my wife would have the password, and it would have no browser, no nothing. The phone could only do texts, email, and phone calls. And then I also had an app for my computer, which once you initiated it, it would kill the internet for however long. So 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. And there's nothing I could do to get the internet back. So I would go to Hawaii with zero internet access, zero Facebook, zero, any of those apps, and have literally just time to think. That alone was the secret to anything for me as far as being able to get back into writing. And so that's the commitment that I made. And I know that sounds like, oh, a great commitment. I'm sitting on the beach drinking Mai Tais. I'm not actually drinking Mai Tais. It'd be way too expensive and I'd run out of money really fast. But no, I'd be sitting there and spending 9, 10, 12 hours a day writing because I had nothing else to do. And that's sort of how I got into the zen of it. And again, I recognize that not everybody can do that, but it is what I could do to do the commitment for me to be able to just dedicate myself to this.
I think it's important to look at what gives you creative juices, what is it that triggers those things? And the big part is taking the initiative to take advantage of those things then, not to just put them off because you're being lazy or whatever. I was talking about it a lot with all my painting that I had been doing. When I feel something I kind of want to do it, if I have that little bit of inkling, that means I have the energy and I need to do it now while I have the energy, because otherwise that shit's going to disappear. And I'm going to hit a block where all of a sudden I can't think of anything else that I want to paint or whatever. So if going to Hawaii and turning your shit off works for you, fantastic. I find that traveling kind of does the same thing for me. You know, when I went to Japan, I was a few days out before I came back, where all of a sudden I was itching to be back in my store. And I had all these ideas and I couldn't fall asleep. And I'm just like, I have a note in my phone, like the note app, and I'm just typing out ideas. And I was up to like 40 something odd ideas that I had in my phone. Like, oh, I should really think about doing this. Like I could do this to my shop. And it just like boosts all of that, you know, or like the cabin that you've been to, like my dad's cabin. When I go up there, I let my phone die on the drive up on purpose, and I don't turn it back on until I drive back down. And that like gives me that reset, so that way I have that energy again. We talked a bit, and you're just really good at this, so I want you to be able to tell a little bit about it. But it sucks, but it's true. Like networking is a thing. It's a big thing that you have to be aware of. It doesn't have to suck though. Like it doesn't have to be strictly business. It can just be your friends and stuff. And there doesn't have to be ulterior motives. It doesn't have to be this like really negative thing that people think about, but you need to be aware of it. Like that is how it works, especially within entertainment or anything else. I'm noticing it with the podcast a lot, that if I do like a really good interview and I sit with somebody and I have a good time, I need to make sure that I make them aware that, hey, if you have somebody else that you think that would enjoy this particular thing, put me in contact with them, please, because I would love to do this for somebody else. How important has networking been for your career so far?
I mean, frankly, with this career in entertainment, and I expect probably most careers, networking and who you know is a bigger factor than people want to admit. I mean, I think people probably admit that it is, but talent to a certain degree is obviously necessary and will rise to the top. But oftentimes you will find that it's who you know and who people want to work with that makes all the difference in the world. And, you know, we were talking about it this morning because without getting into detail, I have this company that I would love to start pitching to and whatnot. But the thing is like I'm meeting people that work for that company, and I can't immediately just start going to them and being like, hey, I want to pitch you ideas, because that's not really how good networking works. You've got to become friends with people first, and in a genuine way. Like you can't ever go into something and being like, I'm trying to like get in with this person because I want something. That's not how good networking works.
Well, not only that, but if you don't genuinely like that person, you can't fucking work together well anyways. So it's not worth pursuing.
They have to be so absurdly talented and good at what they do for you to put up with working with bad people. Because I've worked with bad people before, but I've worked with bad people who are amazing at what they do. And it makes it so it's like, okay, I know what I'm getting when I'm working with this person, but at the same time, I'm getting gold. And like, that's okay. You're aware of that, right? But like, for the most part, for most people, you want to work with talented people who are cool and fun to work with, especially when it comes to like making a movie or something, because you're stuck with those people for months, maybe years, depending on what the role is and, you know, who you're working with. So you could be working with someone for years, and you have to make it work. So you don't want to work with assholes. Like people don't really want to work with assholes. Networking is so key and so important. You have to be comfortable talking with people and becoming friends with people. And you have to be comfortable waiting till the right time to ask for something in a way that makes sense. Like, yes, you can talk to someone, do a podcast and be like, you would only ask them to give you a reference if like you got a sense that the podcast was done well, right? Like they had a good time. You would never ask someone that like clearly the podcast sucked. You'd be like, hey man, give me a reference. You'd be like, no.
It should only be something that's mutually beneficial. That's the big thing. People think that when they're networking, they're just like looking for, like people are looking for handouts. People who are networking poorly are looking for handouts. People who are networking effectively are identifying situations where it's mutually beneficial for both parties, and it will, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just mutually beneficial.
I mean, it can, yes and no. So it's mutually beneficial in the sense that it doesn't have to necessarily be transactionally mutually beneficial. Like I can help someone out, and it's not necessarily because they're going to give me something, but I can help them out, and not even necessarily because I want something from them later, but because they're good and I want to help them out. And if I ever need help, I have a feeling that that person would help me if they were in a position to. Again, it's not about, you know, oh, I'm going to do this for someone because I'm going to get something in return. It's just more of a, does this person need my help? Am I in a position to help in a way that makes sense? And are they genuine in what they're, you know, seeking and who they are? right? And then ultimately that will pay off later if ultimately I'll need them for something.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I feel like it reaches so much further than just like what that initial interaction anyways, right? It's the butterfly effect of like, if somebody's asking you, right, for that type of thing to suggest them for it, you're not going to unless you think they're the right person, right? You're just not, because it's going to make you look stupid. Yeah. So you will if you think they're the right person, and you will help them out and make that connection, and it does help them, and you don't get any sort of benefit. Well, okay, yeah, they may end up helping you in the future, but the person that you made that recommendation to, when they are good, that's a whole nother side of it too that does eventually might end up benefiting you. It's like, I like to have the idea of anything in front of me that is relatively easy for me to do for somebody else, I will just do. Yeah. Like, unless I know that they're just kind of a jackass. But in general, you know, it's the whole idea of like, you just open the door for the person in front of you, not expecting anything, but like, it's not that big a deal for you to help. It doesn't hurt you in any way. Then yeah, you might as well help that person.
Yeah, I would say, I would agree with you in that if you're in a position to help, and again, the person that is requesting the help, or maybe they're slyly requesting the help or whatever, but if you're in a position to help and they are genuinely good and at what they're doing and like will be a good use to whoever you're recommending that person to, then yes, you should. You should never be like, well, why should I bother helping this person? Because like, that's just stupid. That would be an asshole thing to do.
It benefits both of you for sure.
Benefits everybody. And again, almost everything in life comes down to connections you make and who you know. People want to help people that are genuinely good people to work with and just good people in general. You don't want to help assholes, because why would you want to help the assholes unless literally they were so talented that they would do the job well, and that in that sense you're helping the person that you're recommending them to.
True, but even in that, like with a podcast, because I think about that, like who I want to interview, right? And it could be people that are really successful, but forever, assuming my podcast gets really big, which I really genuinely think it will, that person, I have a commitment that they're forever part of the history of the show. They're forever going to be there. I don't want to be associated with somebody that I personally like wouldn't be cool hanging out with.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be associated with you. So it has to be somebody that I enjoy and that I respect. And it's like a little bit nerve-wracking when I do interviews with people that I don't know. So I'm like, God, please, I hope I don't sit down with you and think like, I wish I didn't do this interview. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about a time then. Tell me about a connection that you had made at some point that ended up later on becoming really beneficial for you.
I have a lot of people that have been very good for me through the years and that have ultimately helped me. I would say, to answer your question, I have a guy named Steve Eddy. We went to college together. We knew each other in college. And then we sort of kept in contact in like a sort of fun way. You know, we saw each other every once in a while. And then ultimately he was the guy that when I was working at the Henry Fonda Theater, when I was managing that concert venue, who I was having a beer with, and just like, I was just like, oh man, I really miss making things. Like I really miss making things. And he was the one who was like, hey, I have a friend who's making a short film. You know, they're trying to like raise money to make this short film, and I could recommend them to you, you know, and as a director. And I was like, well, I haven't really directed anything, you know, since college. And this was like 8 years after college. And he was like, oh, whatever, I'll just recommend it. And then ultimately we all got together and we had a great time. And then he produced this short film. The actors and writers were in it and I directed it. And then that film festivaled. And then through that relationship, he was the one that ended up getting a job working for the parent company that did Stanley's YouTube channel. And he's the one that reached out to me and was like, hey, why don't you do Stanley's YouTube channel? And I was like, sure. So we did that, and then now he's a very high-powered executive, and he's reading some of my scripts and just giving me advice. Like, I'm not asking anything of him from that, but like, that's a guy who's just been very good to me throughout my career. There's so many people that I can say in that, and I've done a lot of different things because, again, anyone that's in entertainment, you go project to project, so you work with a lot of random different people. And you never know, like, who, like, I'm about to have a meeting next week with a kid who I interned with way back in the day, and we sort of lost contact, but a little bit. But I reached out to him the other day, and I was like, I haven't talked to you in years, but like, I'm writing now, and it turns out he's an executive working at a big movie studio, and he was like, yeah, just, you know, let's have lunch. And, you know, maybe nothing will come from that. The only thing I'm really looking for with something like that is just good advice. And maybe something better will come out of it. I don't know. But, it's really interesting how people that you wouldn't expect that you would have a brief interaction with for like maybe 2 months when you're interning 10 years ago. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm going to have lunch with them and they're in a position that could potentially help me. And if not, whatever, we're just having a good lunch. That's how networking works.
In a nutshell.
The other big thing about networking is you have to be okay reaching out to people who you haven't talked to in a while and just saying, hey, I would love to pick your brain about something, because you never know. Like with you with the podcasting, you just reach out to people like, hey, I'm doing this podcast. Let's chat. Maybe they'll be like, I don't have time or I don't care, which is fine. But you never know. You never know when someone's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I won't get into it, but like I had lunch with a producer who's made movies that everybody has heard of not too long ago. And it was one of those like lark sort of, hey, I'm really looking for some advice. And that person happened to be in a good mood. And they're like, sure, let's have lunch. And so great. Maybe that won't ever like pay off in any certain way. Maybe it will. I don't know. But that is networking.
So you're spending all this time, right? You spent writing this last year. Now you're out trying to make all of these projects a reality. What exactly are you doing with your time right now to try to make these things successful?
Well, okay. So 2019 was a year of writing. Like I did a little bit of networking and things like that, but like it was mostly, this is the year to write and just see if I can even do this again. Because writing it's exercising your brain, right? It's like you need to do it every day. You need to get in the habit of it. It's like learning a musical instrument. It's like exercising. It's like everything where you have to do it every day. If you don't do it every day, you're just not going to do it, right? So that's what this last year was. This year, I'm still writing. I do plan on, I have a couple projects that I want to get done. But at the same time, this year, the focus is much more on going back to Los Angeles and meeting as many people as I possibly can and just seeing what I can do. So I'm heading to LA tomorrow. You're driving with me. It's going to be a very exciting, long 6-hour drive. We're going to probably listen to your podcast. It's going to be great. But I'm going to head down to Los Angeles, and I already have like 6 meetings set up. And some of them are with actual like executives. One's with, I have a writing manager who's been very good to me through the years. We're going to talk strategy. There's also, I'm just meeting with friends just to sort of rebuild connections that I sort of lost after living up north for a couple of years. So I'm working hard on that aspect and just letting everybody know like, hey, you know what? I spent this last year writing and I'm going to spend this year hustling as much as I can, trying to meet as many people as I can. And if they're in a position to help, they'll help. And if they don't, then that's fine too.
I think it's really, 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 really important for you to understand people aren't going to just find your cool shit.
No.
Like I've had this conversation with people, and that's what sucks with artists that are so talented and they don't get discovered is like, yeah, you create something awesome. You may create a really, really great script, but you can't assume somebody's going to find it and make it happen. You have to put in that legwork. You
have to hustle. And then on top of it, the other thing to know, and I can't speak for other industries per se, but I think it's just sort of human nature. People like to like things that other people like, right? So it's not even like, even if you're the best artist in the world, you need to find some way to get people to like it so that other people will like it as well, right? Like for in the film business, there's a lot of people who, these things cost a lot of money, right? It costs a ton of money to make a movie. So nobody's just going to make it. That's why we get so much junk is like they'll greenlight something that someone else who's already made something else because other people have already given their approval of that person, right? So it's less of a risk for them. It's dangerous to take a risk on somebody new, right? Because if it doesn't work out, that was your decision, right? But if you're like, oh, this person has made this movie, it didn't work out. Well, I don't know why, so ultimately you need to figure out a way to get people to notice you and to build a sort of momentum to get other people to be like, oh, other people are noticing this, right? It's like the idea of standing in line, right? It's like no one goes to where some people go to where there's no line, but ultimately when people see long lines, they'll be like, oh, what are people waiting in line for? It must be good, right? So it's the same kind of mentality, which is like, you need to figure out a way to get your shit out however you can. And then when you find that one person that's like, cool, you need to find a way to use that to get other people to go, oh, that person thinks it's cool, so it might be cool. So let me check it out. It's sort of the way it works.
So I would hop on that a little bit more too and say, you have to be your number one fan as well. And it sucks with like self-promotion. People feel so modest and they really don't want to do it. And I totally understand it. You don't want to come across as cocky, but if you don't 100% believe in whatever the product is that you're trying to sell, the service you're offering, your script that you wrote, if you don't 100% believe that it's worth it, nobody else is gonna. Yeah. You have to believe in it first. That's your number one fan. After that, hopefully it's your friends and family that discover it. You know?
And you have to genuinely believe in it too.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because if you give a fake belief, then people they can pick that up. Like you have to really I have a project that is a movie that I want to make, and it's a very personal movie, but at the same time, I think it's a very commercial film. But it is so I see it. I see every moment of it. I know that movie's gonna make money. It's gonna make a ton of money. And I fully believe that. And I can pitch that to the world because I fully believe that. If I wrote something, my manager's trying to get me to write a Hallmark movie right now because she's like, everyone's buying these cheesy cable Christmas movies, right? And everyone's buying them right now, and it'll be really easy for you to sell. But I have a problem even just writing something like that because I don't really enjoy it personally. If you do like it, great, that's fine. But I don't, right? I hate that kind of stuff, and I would never be able to sell that well because if I wrote a script that I did not like, I would never show it to anybody, first off, but I could definitely not even try to sell to them because people would pick up the fact that I think it's crap.
Yeah, well, that's just not the people that's not the like-minded people that I'm talking about, right? The people that are listening to the show, if you're talking about pursuing your passions, yeah, you need to believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, it's no different than working for some random corporation. Yeah. You're trying to please somebody else. You're working based on the things that they want, not the things that you want. And we're trying to focus on our own lives, how we can positively affect the people around us based on the things we want to be doing that make us fulfilled. And yeah, if you work really, really hard, your passion comes through on whatever that project is, as long as you're satisfied, number one, that's all that really matters. You just have to be satisfied. But when you are, like I said, it's important for you to recognize that other people aren't going to believe in you if you don't believe in you, and it doesn't come across as cocky and shit if it is something good that you believe in.
Yeah, well, people are drawn to confidence. I mean, that's just, with anything in life, people are drawn to confident people because you need other people to believe in what you're doing. And that's, ultimately the most important thing. There's a reason con men are called confidence men because they have confidence and it makes people believe in them, right? Now, it helps when you actually believe in what you're doing, right? But people can pick up if you're kind of full of shit, right? And that, I think one of the biggest things for me in writing this year is there was a switch that happened at a certain point in my writing where I started writing far more truthful things. So for example, I'll write something that is a kid's movie, right? But underpinning that is some truthful elements. It's funny. It's like when your sister reads the stuff I write, she's like, oh, there's this I recognize from our life. And there's this. And then, yeah, that's totally you. And I'm like, you're right. Because what I've been doing this past year, and part of the reason I think my writing has been better, is that I'm actually pulling from my own life and truth into it. And people, I think, pick up on that. Even if you don't know me, you'd pick up that it's just something feels more right. Then it's I'm not just trying to cram a fake story into something. I'm actually putting real emotions and real thought into things, and my real life is sort of seeping through into certain stories. And that, I think, is another important thing, especially with me, things like musicians. It's you can tell when a musician's writing something really from the heart, or they're just writing something to be commercial. You can really tell the difference.
That's why I love the podcast, is because we're talking about things people truly care about. Yeah. And the biggest parts that I talk to my guests about a lot of times before we do the interviews, which I talk to every guest before the interview and explain what we're doing except for you. So you're the one. But I always explain that, the most important part of it isn't talking about this thing you did that is going to impress people. It's not about impressing people because that just kind of creates distance, which is really unfortunate. The part that does really well is when you can get that emotional connection, when people can relate to you. That's why memoir books and stuff are so popular. That's why those movies, Straight Outta Compton and stuff, 'cause it's not about what NWA did as they later on. It's about where they came from and you being able to envision. It's hard for me to envision myself in that specific one, but you know what I mean? It's when you see people like that as people, as relatable peers, that's when all of a sudden the connection's built, and that's when everything's it's such a better quality. You know what I mean? Because it's real. It doesn't have, and even when you look at things that do become really big, your Star Wars or whatever else, the reason that people really like it is because they feel connected with whoever the hero is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's if you can't make that connection, then it doesn't matter how good you are with a, what do they say, laser sword now?
Yeah, the laser sword. Well, it's funny. It's like bringing it back for a second to the YouTube show I did, the player piano. While we were making that, and I think it comes across in the videos and why people like them, because we have very high likes compared to dislikes, and like compared to most YouTube videos, it's actually pretty high up there with mostly positive responses. But I think that it really comes across. Everybody that made those videos loved making those videos. Like I had like our cinematographer, Steven, he would constantly tell me, he's like, I love that this exists. You know what I mean? And like for the time that we were making it, we were all like, we just loved being on set. We all had such a good time. And I think that comes across in the videos. I think you can tell that we really love the subject matter and we really loved the music because we put a lot of effort into it. That's what having passion. I mean, that was a project that I willed to existence from nothing. I took a huge risk, borrowed a lot of money from a lot of friends who also took a huge risk on me. I somehow convinced them. And then I convinced them. I had 4 people who I raised $40,000. I had 4 people that I convinced to give me $10,000 to make a piano YouTube channel. Think about that for a second, how crazy that is. And I was like, we're going to make it. This is going to do really well, and I will pay you back plus 20%. This is what's going to happen. I promise you it's going to happen. And I tell you what, within 4 months, I paid those people back with 20%. And I remember one of my friends was like, I assumed you would like pay me back someday. Like you would figure out a way to pay me back regardless, because that's who I am. Like I would have paid them back regardless, even if it failed. She's like, I did not think that you were going to pay me back this quickly, plus 20%. I was like, oh no, I saw this. I knew what we had. I knew how we could do it. And we put everything we had into it. And was it easy? No, it was really hard. And it was really scary for a little while. But like, I saw it, I had the vision, and we made it happen. And the biggest thing I would say to people that have passion, have that vision, know where it's going to go. It's going to be a risk. Don't be stupid about that risk, obviously. Like, think it through. Like I knew if worst case scenario, if it didn't work out, like all those people would have been fine with me taking years to pay them back, but I would have paid them all back. Don't be an idiot, obviously, but like see where the end is. It's like when I write, usually I don't actually write. I don't do an outline. Like I don't like to write like that. Some people have a lot of success doing like note cards and they like think of every like moment of the screenplay and whatnot. I don't really do that. But what I do is I have a very strong vision of what the end of a story is going to be. If I know what the end is going to be, I will figure out a way to get there. But I need to see every moment of that end. And that is when I can write something. And I think with having passion for something like player piano or whatever, I knew where we were going to get to. And I was like, this is where we're going to go. Will this be the end of it? I don't know. But like, this is what we're going to get to. And we got to that. And I was very happy about it.
That's like the best advice in the world. That's how I try to look at things too, is if you have a place you want to get to, it's pretty hard to aimlessly end up there. What you need to do is work backwards a little bit. You need to look at what is the overarching goal. What is it that I want to accomplish? Okay, there's going to be multiple routes that will work that way, but what is it that I ultimately want to be doing? I'm going to take the first couple steps in that direction. And it may end up moving around, but if you know where that end goal is, you take a little sidestep, right? You had to go around this random path, but then you still know what your goal is. So you just go right back in that direction again, and you'll get there. It won't take forever, but that's the right route to be going for sure.
Have a goal. 100% have a goal where you see yourself in that goal. Like I could sit there and be like, oh, I have a goal of like winning an Oscar. Great. That's fine. But like, what does that even mean? Right? Like that's just an aimless sort of thing. I do have a goal of winning an Oscar, but I have a goal of winning an Oscar for a movie that I really believe in. And I think I already wrote the movie that's going to do that. And maybe it won't be, but whatever. But even though I'm aiming high, like that's where I want to go. And will I get there? I don't know, but I'm going to get somewhere in that direction. And then ultimately it might take me somewhere else. But like I have a thought of where I'm going and how to get there. And that's how I execute that.
I share your stories with people all the time to make me feel like I'm connected to something that's like outlandish and rad. So you're going to have a good one. But I want you to share an experience that you're really thankful happened to you, but it's only happened because you chose to pursue your passion for writing this year.
Okay, so I'm going to share an experience that I'm grateful happened. That was actually a negative experience, but I'm really grateful that it happened. So at the beginning of the year, I was like, I'm going to get back into writing. So I'm going to write some scripts for existing television shows. I'd never done that before. And I was like, it's just fun to write a script for an existing TV show, right? So one of the scripts I wrote was for Magnum Pi, which is a show that takes place in Hawaii. Again, I love Hawaii. We can argue whether Magnum Pi is a good show or not, but like, whatever. I wrote a fun episode of Magnum Pi, and I would argue is a really good episode of Magnum Pi. Fine. So I got it circulating and actually got it to one of the executives that works on that show. And what happened was I was in Hawaii at one point doing one of my writing trips. I had just finished this feature film that I was pretty happy about. And I was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the next thing for the project I was doing. And my manager emailed me and she was like, hey, so I got some news back from the people at Magnum Pi. And like the response I got was like a very stock sort of like, no, it doesn't quite work and blah, 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 blah. And I was, again, I'm actually not upset about the people from Magnum Pi because you got to assume that people like that on shows that are big and existing, that they get this kind of shit all the time, right? So like I don't actually hold anything against them in the sense of like turning down this script because they have a writer's room, they have writers. It's like they're not going to just buy a script from some random freaking dude, right? But anyway, it was the way it was written. It seemed just very like, it just pissed me off at the time because I was like, fuck you. Like, I can't even like write for the like Magnum Pi. And I was so mad. I was so angry. And again, I don't blame them, but like at the time, in that moment, I was so like disappointed and angry at myself. And I'm like, I'm not even good enough to get Magnum Pi to like my goddamn script. And I was in Honolulu at the time doing one of my writing trips. And I was angry. So I put on my headphones, started playing random Spotify songs and just walking around Honolulu. And I walked around for like 8 hours, just listening to music, being angry. Like, I hate to admit that I was angry, but I was like bitter and pissed off and angry. And while I was walking around in those 8 hours, this character started forming in my head. And it was like this burning, character like screaming in my head for this thing. And the very next day I woke up, I went out and I watched the sunrise over the beach in Honolulu. And I just could not shake this thought of this character. And during those 8 hours, I also saw an ending. And I was like, I need to write this. I need to write this thing. So I started writing this and I wrote it as a book. And I started it and I finished the thing in 30 days. I wrote an entire book in 30 days. And I like every moment of it was like just this burning sort of like, it's my favorite thing I've ever written. And I printed it out and I left a copy for Kate, my wife, on the table. And I had a note that just said, F Magnum Pi. And again, I actually still love Magnum Pi and I love the shows. And you know what? Heck, I would still write for that show. And so like, whatever. But I wrote the best, in my opinion, the best thing that I've written based on the fact that I was so angry about being denied by Magnum Pi.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.